Hello, this is Lauren Holly Allen back with you again. Emergency Management Made Easy with Lauren. Class 8 series. Part 2 is what we are going to dive into today. What exactly do the helpers do? But before we discuss that, I want to take you through a little review of Mr. Rogers' advice. Always look for the helpers last week. That was class 7. And I introduced you to ICS, Incident Command System. Do you remember what the Incident Command System is and what it's for? Briefly, the quick quiz. ICS consists of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management System inspired standards of hierarchy and procedure. Its design is for managing temporary emergency incidents of any size. That's ICS. We talked about preparedness. We talked about prevention, intervention, recovery, and mitigate. We talked about all of those last week, and they are in your notes. And if you're new to this channel, you have to go back to class 7 for review. So we're moving on to class 8. What exactly did it help us do, part 2? Well, this is a rhetorical question, and I'm going to tell you why. But before we answer, let's take a look at both NIMS and ICS. The ICS is the Incident Command System, but the NIMS is the National Incident Management System. And they're both the same by a different name, but the concept is the same. Whether it's National Incident Management System, NIMS, National, or Incident Command System. Be it national or be it local, they both mean the same thing. NIMS guides all levels of government, federal, state, all of it, and non-government organizations called NGOs. Those are the non-government organizations. All of us here in the United States operate under that system. And the private sector are to work as teams together to prevent, protect against, and mitigate, remember that from last week, respond to, response, and recover from incidents. That's your recovery. This is from last week. I'm bringing them all together. This is part 2. NIMS provides the entire country with a shared vocabulary to avoid loss of life and wasting time during an emergency. Remember last week we talked about Dubai? They didn't waste any time. Put the fire out and no loss of life. The approach is multi-agency cooperation, which guides how all emergency personnel work together collaboratively. They work together. So that's NIMS, ICS, and the NGOs, the private sector, non-government organizations are to perform the same way. We all work together cohesively. So this week, based on what you've learned, how do helpers work together at every level? From federal, state, county, city. How do we all work together? Especially here in the U.S. and of course wherever you live. Alaska, Hawaii, Africa, India, wherever you are. How can you work together cooperatively and collaboratively? That's the word, collaboratively. Bear with me. I'm tongue-tied today, maybe. So I promised you a real story last Friday. So I'm going to get right into the real story and help you to understand NIMS, ICS for NGOs and everyone. On July 18th, 2001, the Howard Street Tunnel Fire, also known as the Baltimore freight rail crash, CSX, was a 60-car transportation freight train derailment that occurred in the Howard Street Tunnel, a freight through route underground. The derailment sparked a chemical fire that raged for 5 or 6 days and virtually shut down Baltimore, the Baltimore area where I live. Shut it down. I love to talk about Baltimore because we've had some real incidents and problems in our area. The accident disrupted East Coast rail service, slowed internet service in the United States for a few hours, and ruptured a water main, flooding the streets above. Now, this is down in the tunnel where the trains are. So that's where the disruption began. The derailment and fire around 3 p.m. an eastbound 60-car train operated by CSX was moving through the Howard Street Tunnel under downtown Baltimore. The 45th and 46th cars separated, and cars 46 through 56 derailed at 3:08 p.m. The 52nd car, a tank car loaded with tripropylene, a liquid chemical, ruptured, and the liquid caught fire, which spread to adjacent cars carrying paper, pulpwood, and plywood. Another tank car ruptured, eventually releasing 2,554 U.S. gallons of hydrochloric acid. Just think about that happening in your neighborhood. The train's emergency brake came on when the cars separated, but the crew didn't realize that the derailment had taken place until around 3:26 p.m. They moved the locomotives out of the tunnel. Around 4 p.m., smoke was seen coming from a sewer near the intersection of Howard and Lombard Streets, and the fire department was notified. Smoke later emerged from the ends of the tunnel and from several manholes. Around 6:15 p.m., a 40-inch cast iron water main above the tunnel burst due to the deformation, eventually releasing about 14,000 U.S. gallons of water. The fire burned for about 5 days. Firefighters' efforts could not begin until the location of the fire within the tunnel could be found, which occurred at 5 a.m. on July 19th. As crews worked to repair the water main, firefighters found a manhole cover on Howard Street through which they could gain access to the broken water main and the tunnel itself, and the firefighters' efforts began to earnest. In other words, they could get to the fire at that point. 3 wheel cars, box cars of paper and plywood, were removed from the tunnel and their flaming content were extinguished the morning of July 22nd. Hope you're following, and if need be, keeping notes. The water main break was stopped on the same day. Tunnel inspectors determined that there was no significant structural damage, and the tunnel was reopened to traffic at 7:45 a.m. on July 23rd. The effects on the surrounding area. 1. The derailment and subsequent fire and flooding closed streets and businesses in much of downtown Baltimore for several days. 2. The fire burst water main, damaged power cables, and left 1,200 Baltimore buildings without electricity. 1,200. 3. It severed WorldCom fiber optic cables through the tunnel, slowing regional, national, and transatlantic internet traffic until WorldCom installed a bypass 36 hours later. 4. This emergency led to extreme heavy congestion on local roads. In fact, a ball game was in progress and people were leaving the area initially during the first day of this emergency. Smoke from the incident and flooding canceled 3 baseball games, which cost the team, Baltimore Orioles, $5 million. 5. Thousands of Baltimore workers were unable to reach their jobs. And 6. The Maryland Transit Administration shut down Central Light Rail Line service through the city for more than 7 weeks, with shuttle buses running. The MARC light rail, the MARC train, our light rail, was disrupted, which impacted the local airport transportation. People could not use the MARC train to get in from the airport throughout the state. 7. 3 weeks later, manhole covers flew into the air as underground explosions along West Pratt Street occurred due to residual explosive chemicals from the fire in the sewers. A 3-year investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board was unable to find the cause of the accident. So who's responsible for what and when? Quick quiz question. Baltimore City Emergency Management has overall authority over this emergency. It's a multifaceted agency emergency, right? Many people are involved, have been called to help, the helpers that we talked about. I was with the Emergency Management Agency State, monitoring, logging, and providing backup support in the event that Baltimore City or our state needed additional federal or out-of-state resources. That's my job for the day. I wasn't doing training. I wasn't doing training coordination. That was my job for that day. Even I, in a state agency, had a emergency job, a safety job to do for my agency during this emergency. Keep that in mind. Example, if the electricity were out and the local electric company was unable to manage it, we would seek help from the nearest cities and counties. We would seek help. Or whatever help we would need, we would request that from my office, the emergency management offices, helping to coordinate with Baltimore City. And we would be helping to coordinate at the federal level, the state, federal. The fire had to be extinguished, which means the fire department was in total command, in charge of the incident initially. Nothing could happen until the fire was extinguished. Smoke was bellowing from the underground and impacting the environment. The Department of the Environment, with fire, public information officers, shout out to my friends who are probably watching, and television networks were responsible for alerting the public, especially nearby residents, to shelter in place and in some instances cut off their air conditioning units, right? Because these chemicals were bellowing in the air. Toxic chemicals. The smoke and chemicals were releasing toxic chemicals throughout the nearby community. The Department of Public Works were responsible for the water main break and the running water throughout the city, which extended for miles. The police department and traffic division were responsible for directing traffic away from the area and monitoring the baseball games and the guests away from the stadium. The Department of Transportation was responsible to provide alternate bus, light rail, and MARC train services. CSX and tunnel inspectors were continually investigating the cause of the emergency. Quick quiz question. During any emergency, what would you do? What would you do? Well, I know you've already answered this question, but I'll answer too. 1, for the multi-team emergency, it all depends upon your job title and where you're employed, whether you're a firefighter, whether you work for the local television station. It all depends on, do you work for Public Works? It all depends on your job duties and where you're employed. That would determine what you would be doing to assist with that response. 2, when we call 911 for assistance, help, who responds depends on the specific emergency. However, if backup or additional services are needed, the first responders, all communicating in one common NIMS, ICS language, request assistance from other first responders or emergency workers, wherever they are. Examples: ambulance services, fire department, police assistance, just the basics for a few. What I've attempted to do today was to help you to understand what it means to call the helpers. Look for the helpers. Know when to call for help. When you call 911, that person who answers the phone will determine what department they call for your emergency. If the police, the ambulance, fire department arrives first, and sometimes in the United States, if possible, because I live near the city, they will arrive at the same time. The fire department will arrive with the ambulance in certain situations. They just automatically do it. But in some areas throughout the world, it may not work that way. But in the United States, ICS, Incident Command System, National Incident Command System, NIMS, that's how we work together as teams, so that we all speak the same language, so that we do not waste time and we are able to serve the public and take care of that emergency as quickly as we can. Can you imagine what was going on in Baltimore City during that CSX train derailment, underground, downtown? It was very, very difficult, but we got through it. And the way we got through it is we all worked together, utilizing these systems that are in place to help us. Hopefully, and I like to say, I think we did as well as Dubai. As far as I know, there was no loss of life during that emergency. And these are the examples that I have been looking for, to give you examples of what these steps are. What does it mean? I wanted you to have good examples, be it Dubai or be it the Baltimore CSX fire. I wanted you to understand. And hopefully you have gained an insight as to what it means to work together at any level, county, city, country. No matter what country you are working in or reside in, hopefully you have some mechanism by which, one, you work together, two, you save lives. If you work together, you're speaking the same language, you're communicating, your walkie-talkies are all similar, you know how to communicate with each other quickly, you can save lives. And that's what it's all about, and that's what this emergency management made easy video is all about and for, to help you to get your hands around complex subjects. Even I was struggling a little bit with the complexity of the subject matter, but I want to communicate it with you in ways that you can absolutely wrap your hearts and hands around and your minds around. If you have any questions, you know that you can communicate with me. If you need to consult with me, or if your group needs to consult with me, we can do that too. I always leave you with my email, and I always manage to put it aside. Give me a second. And I know better than to come before you and not be prepared. Bear with me. My email address. You ready? You writing it down? Prepare before it happens at outlook.com. Prepare before it happens at outlook.com. Whatever you need, be it a conversation, by phone, a Zoom call, whatever you may need, a FaceTime call, we can do that. Or just simply email me and say, this is my concern, and this is what I do not understand. And I will take time, if it's not too lengthy, to explain it again. And if that is not enough, we can always do a consultation. Hopefully, I have provided some good information for you and you have taken great notes. Now, next week, we'll move beyond the NIMS ICS, all of the preparedness jargon that are the basic information that all emergency management teams and safety teams need to know. And we will come back to our discussion in regard to your emergency plan and where you are in that process. And we'll do a review, and hopefully in that review I will get an idea of where you are, or you will have an idea of what you need to do. Until I see you next week, and I'm looking forward to it, have a good week. I know there are challenges, but nothing we can't handle if we are prepared. Bye-bye. See you next week. Friday is the day that I drop the new videos.